Hey everyone. Tonight we're heading back in time to the thunderous heart of the Roman Empire's naval power. Imagine it's a bright morning, maybe a touch too bright, and you're standing on the dockside at Ostia, Rome's bustling port, the air thick with the smell of salt, sweat, and something vaguely like a fish market that's seen better days, hums with the organized chaos of the Roman fleet. You're not here as a tourist, though. Not today. Today, you're a fresh-faced recruit, your feet still sore from the long march to the coast, your mind a whirlwind of patriotic bravado and a deep, churning dread. Before you, a massive galley ship bobs gently on the water, its painted prow gleaming in the sun, a predatory smile of polished bronze, its oars, like 100 silent, wooden arms, wait patiently to embrace the sea. You're about to step aboard, and let me tell you, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And for those of you who want to continue waiting for the next exciting parts, feel free to like and follow the channel. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel a rough shove from the legionary behind you, a grunt of impatience that breaks your daydream. It's time. The plank creaks under your weight, a flimsy bridge between the solid world you know and the floating hell you're about to call home. As your boots hit the deck, the ship seems to swallow you whole. The sheer scale is staggering. Above you, rigging as thick as your arm snakes its way up to a towering mast. Below, the thrum of 100 men already at work seems to vibrate through the very planks beneath your feet. You're jostled by men moving with purpose, their faces a mixture of grim determination and weary resignation. This isn't the glorious battlefield you were promised. It feels more like a floating factory, a grimy, noisy, and utterly alien world. You're just another piece of raw material being fed into the machine. Your first orders are shouted over the din, a confusing flurry of Latin that you only half understand. A centurion with a face like sun-baked leather and a scar that runs from his temple to his chin points a gnarled finger toward a hatch in the deck. The descent is steep, a ladder that feels more like a chute into the belly of a beast. The air down here is different, heavier, hotter, and thick with a powerful nanino, cloying stench. It's a perfume of unwashed bodies, stale bilge water, and the sour tang of vomit. This is the galley's gutter, the lowest of the low, and you're officially a part of it. The darkness is only broken by the flicker of oil lamps, casting long, dancing shadows that make everything seem more sinister. You can barely see the faces of the men packed in around you, their eyes glinting in the gloom. They're all new, just like you, but their silence speaks volumes. They've already realized what you're just starting to understand. The dream of glory has been replaced by the very real nightmare of survival. You're a cog in a human machine, and the machine is already in motion. Historians still argue whether most oarsmen were freemen or slaves, but down here the distinction feels meaningless. You all look the same, terrified, dirty, and utterly alone. A quirky tidbit you might find interesting is that in some Roman galleys, particularly the larger ones, there was a specific position known as a trierarch, a sort of junior officer who was sometimes responsible for a single bank of oars. He wasn't exactly a captain, but he held a position of authority over the oarsmen. You, on the other hand, are just an oarsman. Your place is on the bench. The wood is hard and unforgiving, and you realize you'll be sharing this space, this bench, this life, with a stranger to your left and a stranger to your right. You glance at the man next to you. His eyes are wide with a fear that mirrors your own. You're connected not by camaraderie, but by a shared fate, a collective and silent dread. This is your new reality, and the ship hasn't even left the dock yet. You can't help but wonder what fresh horrors await you once the anchor is raised and the oars start to churn the water. The thought alone is enough to make you queasy, and you lean back against the bulkhead, trying to find a solid point of comfort in a world that is already beginning to list. The moment the anchor's massive weight is hauled aboard, the whole ship groans in protest. You feel a lurch, a subtle but unmistakable shift as the galley frees itself from the harbor's embrace. Suddenly, the air changes. The stale, heavy perfume of the port is replaced by the biting, clean scent of open sea, a smell that, for a moment, feels like freedom. But that feeling is short-lived. The real work is about to begin, and it starts with a tour of your new home, the gutter. A grizzled veteran oarsman, his face a roadmap of hard living, gestures with a thumb toward a section of the lower deck. This is your personal space, a narrow bench where you'll sit, eat, and sleep for the foreseeable future. The benches are just barely wide enough for two men, a constant, physical reminder of the ship's ruthless efficiency. There's no privacy, no quiet corner, just the suffocating press of bodies and the perpetual, rhythmic creak of the hull. You're told this is the comfort you'll get, and the veteran lets out a dry, rattling cough that serves as a humorless laugh. Your eyes, now adjusted to the dim light, begin to pick out the details of your new surroundings, and they're not pretty. The floor beneath your feet is a patchwork of grime and spilled provisions. You see a centurion casually kicking a rat that darts across the deck, a futile effort, as dozens more are surely lurking in the shadows. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of Roman hygiene practices on ships, but down here, it's clear they were minimal at best. The stench you first noticed is now a full-body experience. It's a complex bouquet of sour sweat, human waste, and the damp, earthy smell of wood slowly rotting in the humid air. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran is that some sailors would rub their bodies with olive oil and then scrape it off with a special curved tool called a striggle to clean themselves. But this was a rare luxury. For you, a splash of salty seawater is likely to be your only bath for weeks on end. As you're led further into the gutter, you see the true source of the filth. A narrow, trough-like channel runs the length of the ship's bottom, filled with a murky and stagnant liquid bilge water. It's a toxic soup of seawater that seeps in, old food, human waste, and whatever else trickles down from the decks above. This is the cesspool that your home floats upon. Your guide explains, with a certain grim pride, that you'll be taking turns bailing this out, a job that is as back-breaking as it is stomach-turning. The thought of plunging a bucket into that fetid liquid and heaving it overboard makes you shudder. It's a task that's never-ending, a Sisyphean punishment for a crime you didn't even commit. The galley's design, while ingenious for speed and warfare, was a nightmare for sanitation. The tight packing of bodies in a closed space with no proper ventilation created a perfect breeding ground for disease. You'll be living cheek by jowl with your fellow oarsmen, and a single sick person could potentially infect the entire crew. You hear a raspy cough from a few benches over and can't help but wonder if that's how it begins. A small, nagging ache in your own chest makes you nervously swallow. A light joke, if you can even call it that, is the common saying among the veteran oarsmen, you haven't truly lived until you've tasted the bilge water vintage of 47. They all chuckle without a hint of genuine humor. It's the sort of shared misery that builds a strange sort of bond. You're given a thin woolen blanket and a small wooden bowl. This is it. Your worldly possessions have been reduced to the bare essentials of survival. A centurion barks an order, and the first lesson begins. You're taught how to strap a leather brace to your bench, a brace that will eventually become an extension of your body, a second skin. It's meant to protect your ribs from the constant friction of rowing, but it feels more like a shackle. You can feel the eyes of the other men on you, assessing you, seeing if you have what it takes to survive. They've all been through this first day of suffocating reality. You realize that out here, on the water, the enemy isn't just the other side's fleet. The enemy is the sea itself, the constant threat of disease, the ruthless discipline of the centurions, and the very galley you're on. Your first day hasn't even ended, and you're already fighting for your life, not against a sword, but against the very air you breathe. The sun has set, the last sliver of orange sinking below the horizon, and you feel the rhythmic rise and fall of the ship with every beat of your exhausted heart. Your stomach, which has been performing a series of increasingly elaborate gymnastics routines all day, now rumbles with an emptiness that is both profound and painful. It's time for dinner, a word that feels like a cruel joke. A centurion barks an order and a line forms, a shuffling, weary parade of men with their wooden bowls extended. The smell that drifts from the large cooking pot is indescribable. It's a mix of sour grains and something vaguely fishy, but with a powerful undertone of neglect. You receive your ration. It's a thick, gray paste, a lumpy gruel that looks more like something you'd use to patch a crack in a wall than to eat. A veteran next to you sees the look on your face and gives you a weary, knowing smile. Pulse, boy, he rasps. The lifeblood of Rome. Tastes better than it looks, and that's not saying much. Pulse was a sort of porridge made from boiled wheat or other grains, the staple food for most Roman soldiers and, apparently, oarsmen. Historians still argue about the exact composition of the shipboard pulsome, but it's clear that it was a monotonous, if calorie-dense meal. You are also given a small ration of sour wine, diluted with water, to wash it down. It's a thin, vinegary liquid that burns your throat and does little to quench your thirst. The food is tough to get down. The taste is bland and starchy, and the texture is gluey and unappealing. You try to focus on the fact that it's fuel, not a feast, but your stomach is not impressed. You see some of the more seasoned men wolfing it down without a second thought, their movements a testament to how long they've been surviving on this fare. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran is that sometimes they would get a bit of cheese or a piece of salted fish to go with the pulse. But that was considered a rare luxury, a feast day to be celebrated. Most of the time, it's just the gruel and the watered-down wine. The whole meal is a lesson in humility, a powerful and visceral reality check that reminds you just how far you've fallen from the comforts of your old life. Your water ration is another source of misery. It's not fresh, it's stored in large, leather wineskins and wooden barrels, and by the time you get a sip, it's lukewarm and tastes faintly of salt and whatever else has been growing in the barrel. The centurion tells you to conserve every drop, that the journey is long, and a thirsty oarsman is a useless one. You take a sip and the taste is awful, but the knowledge that you might not get another for a while forces you to swallow it down. Water management on a Roman galley was a constant struggle. Historians still argue about how often galleys would stop for fresh supplies, as it was a massive logistical undertaking to keep hundreds of men hydrated on long voyages. The constant need for water also meant that there was a powerful incentive to get to a port as quickly as possible, a factor that often influenced naval strategy. As you finish your meager meal, you realize this isn't just a physical hardship, it's a mental one. The lack of variety, the constant hunger, the gnawing thirst, it wears you down, grinding your spirit as surely as the centurion's words grind your pride. A light joke you hear from a veteran is that the centurion's beard is so long because it's the only thing he's allowed to grow on the ship. It's not great, but it's a moment of shared, dark humor. You find yourself focusing on the smallest things, the way the moonlight reflects off the water, the brief taste of salt on your lips, the momentary relief of a full, if not satisfied, stomach. These tiny moments become the only luxuries you have, and you learn to cling to them. You sit on your bench, the hard wood digging into your flesh, the sounds of the other oarsmen settling down for a restless night, and you can't help but wonder if you'll ever eat a hot meal again. As the galley cuts through the dark water, the world above the deck disappears, and your existence becomes defined by the cramped, sweaty, and noisy confines of the gutter. It's here you learn about the galley's social ladder, a rigid and unforgiving structure that keeps everything from descending into complete anarchy. You're on the bottom rung, a simple oarsman, a beast of burden whose only purpose is to pull on a long piece of wood. The men around you are your peers, your brothers in misery. There's an unwritten code of conduct. a silent understanding that you all need each other to survive, even if you don't know each other's names. Above you, on the next rung, are the veteran oarsmen. Their calloused hands and weary eyes are a testament to their longevity. They know the rhythms of the sea, the centurion's moods, and the little tricks that can make life slightly more bearable. They're a source of knowledge and superstition, and they treat you with a mixture of pity and contempt, waiting to see if you'll last long enough to earn their respect. A quirky tidbit you learn from one of them is that some of the old-timers can tell the exact speed of the ship just by the sound of the water against the hull. The next step up is the centurion, the embodiment of Roman authority on your deck. He's the one who screams the orders, enforces the discipline, and wields a whip that seems to have a personality of its own. He is a harsh master, but he is also a necessary one. His job is to keep the human machine rowing in perfect unison, and he'll do whatever it takes to achieve that. His life is also defined by the ship, and he is just as trapped as you are, albeit in a slightly more comfortable position. A light joke whispered among the men is that the centurion's whip has more friends on the ship than he does. Above him, you have the officers. These are the men who don't row, who eat better food, and who are mostly a source of distant, intimidating authority. You only ever see them as fleeting shadows on the upper deck, their voices carried on the wind, their faces obscured by the darkness. They are a world away, and you learn to not even think about them. They are the Roman Empire, and you are just a tool it uses to project its power. Historians still argue about the exact command structure on a Roman galley, particularly the relationships between the naval officers and the army centurions who often accompanied the crews. Was the captain of the ship always in charge, or did the army officer take precedence in battle? The answer likely depended on the specific situation and the personalities involved. Finally, you're at the very top is the commander, the man in charge of the entire galley. He is an almost mythical figure, a man of power and privilege who dictates the ship's course and destiny. You'll never speak to him, never even get a clear look at his face. He is the master of your fate, and your life is a line in the ledger of his ambition. A mainstream historical fact that you're painfully aware of is that the vast majority of men who served on Roman galleys were not citizens. They were provincials, freedmen, and even slaves. This stark reality is a constant reminder of your place in the Roman hierarchy, a place that is a far cry from the glorious tales of citizenship and duty you were promised. As the night wears on, you start to understand that this hierarchy isn't just about power, it's about survival. The centurion keeps you disciplined, the veterans show you how to endure, and the officers make sure the ship stays on course. Each man has a role to play, and if any one of them fails, the entire ship could go down. You are just a small, essential part of this intricate and brutal system, and your only job is to row. You close your eyes, the constant rocking of the ship lulling you into a state of half-sleep, your mind already starting to adjust to this new, brutal reality. The new day begins not with a sunrise, but with the sharp crack of a whip and the bellowing voice of the centurion. There's no gentle waking. The ship is a machine, and the moment there's enough light to see, the machine must be running. You stumble from your half-sleep, your muscles already protesting, and take your place at the oar. It's a massive thing, a thick tree trunk of polished oak, and it feels impossibly heavy in your hands. This isn't just a paddle, it's a lever, a weapon, and your only connection to the world outside the ship. The first lesson is on rhythm. The centurion is the metronome. His voice a steady chant, his whip a sharp punctuation mark. Stroke hold, pull in he roars, a cadence that will become the soundtrack to your life. You have to move in perfect synchronization with the men around you. One man out of time can throw off the entire row, and a row out of time can slow the entire ship. The centurion doesn't tolerate mistakes. He marches up and down the narrow walkway that runs the length of the galley, his eyes scanning for any sign of a sluggish or uncoordinated motion. A mainstream historical fact you're learning the hard way is that Roman galleys, particularly the larger ones like the quinqueremes, Wynne relied on this strict rhythmic rowing to achieve their impressive speeds and maneuverability in battle. Your first attempts are clumsy. Your muscles scream in protest. Your arms feel like lead, and you can't quite seem to get the timing right. You pull too early or too late, and the oar feels like it's fighting you. You can feel the glares of the veterans around you, their collective frustration of physical weight. The centurion's gaze is like a brand, and you know he's watching you, waiting for a mistake. A quirky tidbit you discover from the old-timer next to you is that a skilled oarsman can tell if the man behind him is rowing correctly just by the subtle vibrations that travel through the oar itself. It's a silent language of wood and muscle, and you're still a long way from understanding it. The pain is immediate and relentless. Your hands, soft from a life that wasn't spent pulling on ropes and wood, are already raw and beginning to blister. Your back feels like it's been set on fire, and the muscles in your legs tremble with the effort of bracing yourself against the bench. The centurion doesn't care. Faster. Harder. Your lives depend on this, he shouts, and the men around you, through gritted teeth, redouble their efforts. The ship lurches forward, the rhythm finding its beat, and for a moment, you're part of something larger than yourself. Historians still argue about the exact training regimen for Roman oarsmen. Was it a long, drawn-out process? Or were men just thrown into the deep end and expected to learn on the job? Your experience suggests the latter. You're not being taught. You're being forged in the crucible of constant, grueling effort. A light joke you hear is that the centurion's mother must have been a drum, because he never stops beating the rhythm into you. The sheer scale of the operation is what's truly staggering. Imagine hundreds of men, all in a confined space, all moving as one. Their bodies a testament to the power of human will and the ruthless efficiency of the Roman war machine. You're a part of it now, a living, breathing component of a warship, and your only purpose is to make it go. The sun beats down on the deck, the salt spray cools your burning skin, and you pull again, and again, and again, until your mind is a blank slate and your body is nothing more than a machine of muscle and bone. Your muscles, once trembling with protest, are now beginning to ache with a dull, rhythmic throb that promises to be a constant companion. As you pull on the massive oar, you start to pay closer attention to the instrument of your misery. It's a marvel of ancient engineering. This oar, made from a single, long piece of wood. It's not a uniform stick. The shaft is thicker where you grip it, tapering down to a narrow point before flaring out into a broad, leaf-shaped blade at the end. This shape is crucial. It helps the oar slice through the air and bite into the water with maximum efficiency. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman galleys used a variety of oar lengths and designs depending on the size and type of ship, but they all share this fundamental and surprisingly sophisticated design. You're a part of a three-man team on your bench. The centurion calls out the orders, and you all pull together. The man closest to the water is the most experienced, setting the pace and controlling the depth of the oar. The man in the middle, like you, is the muscle, providing the raw power. The man at the top is the leverage, his position giving him the advantage of a higher pivot point. Historians still argue about the exact mechanics of how these three-man benches, known as triers, worked in unison, but the results were undeniably effective. The oar itself is held in place by a leather strap, a simple but ingenious system that allows you to pivot the oar without it slipping out of your grip. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran is that sometimes the leather straps would chafe your hands, and they'd use a mix of pig fat and ash to soothe the skin. A surprisingly effective, if disgusting, remedy. The physical toll of this work is immense. Your hands, once smooth, are now a mess of blisters and calluses. The constant friction of the oar against the bench and your body leaves your skin raw and tender. The muscles in your back and shoulders are in a perpetual state of protest. And even when you're not rowing, you can feel the ghost of the movement in your body. It's a total body workout, but without any of the luxury or comfort of a modern gym. There's no cool water, no soft towels, and no friendly encouragement. Just the centurion's bellowing voice and the relentless, demanding rhythm of the ship. A light joke you overhear is a veteran telling a new recruit that his oar is his wife, his bed, and his only friend, and that he should treat her with respect. The new recruit looks at his oar, then at the grizzled veteran, and then back at the oar, a look of profound resignation on his face. It's a moment of dark, shared humor in a place where there is very little to laugh about. You've become intimately familiar with the anatomy of this thing, this giant piece of wood. You know the way the grain feels under your calloused hands, the way the weight shifts as you pull, the way it slices through the water with a satisfying splash and then a powerful groan. This oar is more than just a tool. It's a part of you now, a heavy, unyielding extension of your body. You've lost your name and your past, and in their place, you've become a part of the oar, a living component of the galley's engine. Your world is a blur of motion, a cycle of pull, hold, push, and in, repeated over and over again until your mind is numb and your body is nothing more than a slave to the rhythm. Days blur into a monotonous cycle of rowing, eating, and trying to sleep. The sun beats down, the rain lashes the deck, and you're just a part of the rhythm, a human metronome. Out on the open sea, you're a small, fragile thing, surrounded by an endless expanse of blue. You notice the men on the upper deck aren't just standing around. They're watching the sky, the water, and the sun. This is your first glimpse into how ancient mariners navigated without the luxury of maps or compasses. A mainstream historical fact is that Roman navigators relied heavily on a technique called coastal hugging. They would stay within sight of land whenever possible, using recognizable landmarks, a distinctive mountain, a unique outcropping of rock, a prominent lighthouse to chart their course. This method was safe but slow, and it made you a predictable target for enemy ships and pirates. When you're out of sight of land, the navigation becomes much more of an art form. The veteran oarsman next to you, a man who has seen more seas than you have seen land, points to the sun. That's your guide. Boy, he grunts. She rises in the east and sets in the west. Simple, but it's not that simple. He tells you that they also use the stars. The North Star, or Polaris, was a constant, a fixed point in the night sky that told you which way was north. A quirky tidbit you learn is that navigators would often use a simple device called a gnomon to measure the sun's shadow at noon, which would give them a rough estimate of their latitude. It was a crude but effective way to ensure they weren't too far north or south of their intended course. The centurion's voice takes on a new tone when he shouts, "Watch the birds." He's not just a drill sergeant, he's a student of nature. The flight patterns of seabirds can tell you if there's land nearby. If the birds are flying in a specific direction in the morning, they're likely heading to a nesting or feeding ground on shore. If they're flying back in the evening, they're returning to their nests. It's a simple, elegant system based on observation and a deep understanding of the natural world. Historians still argue about the full extent of Roman navigators' celestial knowledge. Did they know how to use all the constellations, or were they primarily reliant on a few key stars like Polaris? The answer is likely a mix of both, a blend of traditional knowledge passed down from sailor to sailor and more formal training for the high-ranking officers. Your survival is now a product of this ancient science. The men who run the ship are not just warriors. They are astronomers, meteorologists, and cartographers all rolled into one. You realize that a misjudgment could mean running aground on a hidden reef or getting lost in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the sea. The men on the upper deck are the most important members of the crew, their knowledge of the sky and the sea more valuable than any sword or shield. A light joke you hear from a veteran is that the centurion's constant shouting is his way of navigating, that he's trying to find land by yelling at the sea until it gives up. It's a joke that falls flat in the face of the very real danger you're now a part of. You look at the stars, a million distant points of light, and you hope that the men who guide you know what they're doing, because your life, and the lives of every man on this ship, depends on it. The calm, rhythmic pull of the oars, the gentle rocking of the ship, this is the new normal. You've almost forgotten what solid ground feels like. Your body having adapted to this constant, subtle motion, you're lulled into a false sense of security, a dangerous complacency that the old veterans have long since discarded. But the sea, as you're about to learn, is a fickle master. The sky, which was a clear, brilliant blue just an hour ago, now begins to take on a bruised, ominous color. The wind, which was a gentle whisper, is now a sharp, biting gust that whips at the rigging and makes the ship groan with protest. The centurion's voice, usually a constant bellow, is now a series of short, urgent commands. Batten down the hatches. Secure the oars, drop the mast. The deck above you becomes a flurry of activity, a panicked dance of men trying to secure the ship before the storm hits. You're told to lash your oar to the bench to make sure it doesn't become a lethal, uncontrolled battering ram in the chaos to come. A mainstream historical fact you're witnessing is that Roman galleys, with their low freeboard and open decks, were extremely vulnerable to heavy seas. A storm was arguably a more dangerous enemy than any opposing fleet. They were designed for speed in calm water, not for surviving the fury of a tempest. The first wave hits with the force of a giant's fist. It crashes over the bow, sending a torrent of cold, saltwater-filled spray down into the gutter. The ship lurches violently, and you're thrown against the man next to you. The darkness is now punctuated by the shrieking of the wind, the groaning of the wood, and the terrifying roar of the waves as they smash against the hull. You can hear the sounds of men shouting, of things breaking, and of the sea's unceasing, thunderous fury. You feel a primal, gut-churning fear that you've never experienced before. A quirky tidbit you recall a veteran mentioning is that some sailors would throw a piece of their hair or a lock of their beard into the water as a sacrifice to the sea god Neptune, hoping to appease his wrath. You feel a strange urge to do the same, even though you know it's probably just a silly superstition. The galley is now a toy in the hands of a giant child. It's tossed and turned, slammed from side to side, and you can feel the entire structure of the ship creaking and groaning as it struggles to hold together. The bilge water below you sloshes violently, a dark, putrid tide that threatens to overwhelm the ship. Historians still argue about the number of Roman galleys lost to storms versus those lost in battle. The evidence suggests that bad weather was a far more common and devastating cause of naval disaster than any human opponent. The famous Roman defeat at the Battle of the Aegates Islands in 241 BC, which ended the First Punic War, was preceded by a massive storm that decimated the Roman fleet, not just the Carthaginian one. You're just a passenger now, a tiny piece of flotsam clinging to a larger piece of wood. The centurion's orders are gone, replaced by the collective prayers and curses of the men around you. All you can do is hold on tight, brace yourself against the next impact, and hope that the wood holds. A light joke you hear over the roar of the wind, a veteran with a wild look in his eyes screaming at the top of his lungs. Is that at least the storm is a good excuse to stop rowing? No one laughs. The fear is too real, too absolute. This is the moment you realize that on a Roman galley, you're not just fighting a war, you're fighting the very forces of nature. And in this fight, you are hopelessly outmatched. The storm, which felt like an eternity, eventually gives way to a bruised dawn. The sea, still roiling with a heavy, dangerous swell, is no longer trying to tear the ship apart. As the last of the rain gives way to a hazy morning light, the centurion's voice rings out again, his commands sharp and urgent. But this time, it's not about the weather. It's about a different kind of threat, a human one, a lookout on the upper deck, his voice filled with a mixture of terror and excitement. Shouts. Enemy fleet sighted, a single cry of alarm that sends a shockwave through the entire galley. The atmosphere in the gutter shifts instantly. The exhaustion and fear from the storm are replaced by a new, more focused dread. The men, still soaked and shivering, are now scrambling to their positions. The centurion is a whirlwind of motion, barking out orders with a cold, professional intensity. Battle stations, arm yourselves, oars ready. This is what you were trained for, what the endless hours of rowing were meant to prepare you for. But the reality is far more terrifying than the drill. A mainstream historical fact you're seeing in action is that Roman naval battles were not just about ramming, they were also about boarding. The galley was both a weapon and a troop transport, and you were expected to be a soldier as much as an oarsman. You watch as the men around you, your brothers in misery, transform. They pull small, crude leather helmets from their meager belongings, strap on leather greaves, and pull out short, curved swords known as a gladius. The air fills with the sound of metal scraping against leather and the rustle of men preparing for a fight. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran is that some men would carve small, protective charms into the wood of their benches, hoping the gods would protect them in the coming battle. He points to a small, almost invisible carving of a coiled snake on his own bench, a symbol of good luck. The centurion moves through the ranks, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. He reminds you of your duty, of the glory of Rome, and of the shame of cowardice. But his words are just noise. The real message is in the thrumming of the hull, the tension in the air, and the wide, terrified eyes of the men around you. Historians still argue about the exact number of oarsmen who were also armed soldiers. Was it a small, dedicated fighting force on each ship? Or were a significant portion of the oarsmen expected to drop their oars and fight? Your centurion's orders make it clear that a substantial number of you will be fighting today. The distant, hazy shapes on the horizon are now becoming clearer. They're galleys, just like yours, but flying a different flag, the enemy. Your heart pounds in your chest, a frantic drum against your ribs. You can hear the distant, warlike cries of the enemy, a sound that sends a shiver of pure, unadulterated terror down your spine. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a final attempt to lighten the mood, is that at least the enemy fleet probably got just as wet in the storm as you did, but the joke dies on his lips as the centurion barks. Rowers, brace yourselves. The ram is coming. You tighten your grip on the oar, your knuckles white with fear, and you wait for the impact. The moment when you and your ship will either become a hero or a casualty in the grand, brutal story of the Roman Empire. The centurion's order, "The ram is coming," wasn't just a command, it was a warning. Your hands, still raw from 1,000 rows, now grip the oar in a death clutch. The rhythmic pulling has stopped, replaced by a tense, eerie silence. The only sounds are the creaking of the hull, the distant shouts of the enemy, and the frantic pounding of your own heart. A mainstream historical fact you're about to experience firsthand is the defining feature of a Roman galley: battle the bronze ram at the bow. This isn't just a decorative piece. It's a terrifying, purpose-built weapon designed to punch a hole in an enemy ship's hull and send it to the bottom of the sea. The centurion's voice, now a sharp, focused instrument, cuts through the fear. Brace, brace for impact. The entire crew leans forward, their bodies tense, their muscles coiled like springs. The ship lurches forward, the rowers on the upper decks giving one final, powerful pull. The sound is a low, building hum, the sound of the galley at its top speed, a sound you've never heard before. The ship is no longer a boat, it's a torpedo, a guided missile of wood and muscle, aiming for the enemy. You hear the shout from the upper deck, a sharp, clear voice calling out the final distance. 50 paces, 30-10. The world shrinks to a single point, the point of impact. The silence is deafening, a vacuum of all sound before the explosion. A quirky tidbit you learn later from a veteran is that the final order to ram was often called out by a musician on board, who would beat a drum to signal the last, most powerful pull of the oarsman to get maximum velocity. It's a strange, almost theatrical touch to a moment of pure, brutal violence. The impact, when it comes, is not the clean, crisp crack you might expect. It's a bone-jarring, shuddering, world-shattering crunch that vibrates through the entire ship. You're thrown from your bench, a puppet with its strings cut, and you slam into the deck. The sound of wood splintering, men screaming, and the rush of water fills the air. The galley shudders, the sound of 1,000 protesting timbers, and then lurches forward again, a testament to the brutal efficiency of the ram. You can hear the sounds of fighting on the deck above you, the clash of swords, the screams of men in battle. You're in the belly of the beast, and the beast has just taken a bite. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of ramming as a primary tactic in Roman naval warfare. Was it a decisive move, or was it a way to disable a ship and then board it? Your centurion's final orders suggest the latter. You were all braced for impact, but you were also ready to fight. A light joke you hear from a veteran, as he helps you up from the deck, is that at least now you know what it feels like to kiss a 1,000-ton ship. You don't laugh. The reality is too grim, too immediate. You feel the ship begin to tilt, the sound of water gushing into the hold a new, terrifying soundtrack. The fight is just beginning, but you've already learned a painful lesson on a Roman galley. The real terror isn't the enemy, it's the sudden, violent silence before the final, devastating blow. The shuddering impact of the ram is followed by a cacophony of new sounds, the ringing clang of steel on steel, the splintering of wood as boarding parties clash, and the visceral screams of men. You are no longer an oarsman, you are a foot soldier, and the centurion is now your war commander. He bellows orders to a small squad of men, you among them, to secure a breach in the hull caused by the collision. You scramble toward the sound of rushing water, a new kind of terror filling your chest. The bilge water you once complained about is now your life's blood, and you're fighting to keep the enemy's water out. You are handed a small, crude bucket, and you join a frantic line of men bailing out the invading seawater. It's a futile effort, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to keep the ship afloat. A mainstream historical fact you're experiencing is that naval battles were not always about sinking the other ship. They were about disabling it, boarding it, and then capturing the crew and the vessel itself. This breach is a perfect example of that. You're trying to keep your ship from becoming a prize of war, a grim trophy for the enemy. Amidst the chaos, a man near you is screaming. He's clutching his arm, which is gushing blood from a deep gash caused by a flying piece of splintered wood. The centurion, his face a mask of grim determination, points to a man with a small chest on his back. This is the ship's medic, the capsarius. He is not a doctor, not in the modern sense. He's a man with some basic knowledge of herbs and a knack for stopping bleeding. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of Roman medicine, particularly on a moving, pitching ship. Was it more placebo than practical? Your medic is the picture of frantic, professional calm. He pulls out a roll of linen bandages and a small pot of what looks like tar. He applies the tar to the man's wound to stop the bleeding, then wraps it tightly. He doesn't have time for a full-fledged operation. He just has to get the man back on his feet or, at the very least, stop him from bleeding to death. A quirky tidbit is that Roman doctors believed that cleaning a wound with vinegar was an effective antiseptic, and they carried small vials of it for this purpose. The whole scene is a brutal lesson in the limitations of ancient medicine. There are no painkillers, no surgeries, and no antibiotics. An infection from a simple wound could be a death sentence. The man with the gash on his arm is lucky to be alive, and even luckier to have a medic who can stop the bleeding. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a massive, jagged scar on his own arm, is that the medic's tar pot is the second most valuable thing on the ship, right after the centurion's whip. It's a dark laugh, a shared understanding of how close to death you all are. You return to your bailing, the rhythmic splash of water now a part of the soundtrack of the battle. The fight rages on above you, but down here, in the dim, watery confines of the gutter, a different kind of fight is taking place, a silent, desperate battle against the sea, a battle that you're losing one bucket at a time. The battle rages on the upper deck, a distant roar of violence that you are trying to ignore. Your world, for now, is defined by the relentless work of bailing water. The ship, however, is not a stable platform. It lurches and pitches, a constant, dizzying motion that makes a simple task like scooping water feel like a monumental effort. You are exhausted, your muscles screaming from the rowing and now the bailing. The centurion, a man who seems to have no need for rest, notices your flagging energy. He gives you a sharp, disapproving glare and shouts, "We will rest when we are in Hades. Sleep, you're learning, is not a luxury afforded to oarsmen. It is a biological necessity that is only grudgingly and briefly met. Your first night on board was a taste of what's to come. You were told to find a place on your bench, to curl up in a space that was not designed for sleeping. You were crammed in with the man next to you, a constant, uncomfortable pressure from two other bodies. The sounds of the ship, the creaking of the wood, the slap of the water against the hull, the snores and restless shifts of the other men made it impossible to truly rest. You were a part of a collective, a 100-man organism, and when one of you moved, you all moved. A mainstream historical fact you're experiencing is that Roman galleys had no dedicated sleeping quarters for the oarsmen. They slept on their benches, a practice that led to chronic fatigue and a high rate of illness. Your sleep is a series of snatched, disjointed moments. You drift off for a few minutes, your body finally giving in to exhaustion, only to be woken by the sudden lurch of the ship or the sharp jabbing elbow of the man next to you. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that some men would tie a small rope from their bench to their waist so that if they fell asleep and a storm hit, they wouldn't be tossed overboard. It's a grimly practical solution to a grim reality. The lack of proper rest has a profound effect on you. Your mind is foggy, your reflexes are slow, and you find yourself making simple mistakes. You spill a bucket of water, a small but significant error that earns you a sharp curse from the centurion. The veteran next to you, his face a roadmap of sleep deprivation, gives you a weary, knowing look. He tells you that the centurion doesn't care about your sleep. He only cares about your ability to row. Historians still argue about the duration of rowing shifts. Was it a continuous, grueling effort broken by short periods of rest, or was it a series of shifts that allowed for more sleep? Your experience suggests the former, a brutal and relentless cycle of work and barely their rest. A light joke you hear, an old-timer whispering it to a new recruit, is that the centurion's mother must have been a rooster, because he only ever sleeps in short, angry bursts. It's a terrible joke, but in the context of the battle and your extreme fatigue, it's a small, quiet moment of shared humanity. The roar of the battle is still a constant presence above you, and you realize that even if you survive the fighting, you're still locked in a different kind of war, a war against your own body. You scoop another bucket of water, your arms leaden, your mind a foggy, exhausted mess, and you wonder how long you can keep this up. The battle above eventually subsides, replaced by the grim aftermath, the sounds of men tending to the wounded, the clatter of weapons being put away, and the weary, muffled victory shouts. You emerge from the gutter, your body stiff and sore, to find the deck a scene of controlled chaos. The enemy galley, its hull gaping where your ram struck, is being secured by a boarding party. The enemy crew, their hands bound, are being herded below deck to a fate that you can only imagine. But your victory is not a moment of celebration. It is a moment of cold, hard reality. A lesson that the sea is not the only enemy. A lookout on the main mast suddenly shouts, "Another ship on our starboard bow." The shout is not an alarm, but a warning. You look to where he's pointing, and a new shape emerges from the haze of the horizon. This isn't a warship, but a smaller, faster vessel. It sails a dirty patchwork of cloth. The men on board are not in uniform. They are a wild, unkempt crew, their faces obscured by grime and fierce beards. Pirates. This is a new and in some ways more terrifying threat. A mainstream historical fact you're learning is that piracy was a constant menace in the Mediterranean. a shadow war that the Roman Navy was constantly fighting. These pirates weren't state-sponsored soldiers. They were privateers out for plunder and slaves, and they were merciless. The centurion's voice takes on a new, urgent tone. Ready the oars. Full speed. We must not be caught. The victory you just won is now a liability. Your ship is damaged, its crew exhausted, and you are carrying a cargo of prisoners. You are a fat, lumbering prize, and the pirates are a hungry wolf. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran next to you is that pirates often used a special type of net to disable the oars of a galley, a clever and effective way to turn a warship into a defenseless target. The pirates' ship is fast, its sails catching the wind and pulling it along at a terrifying speed. Your rowers, tired as they are now pulling with a renewed sense of urgency, a raw, primal fear of what will happen if you are caught. The centurion is no longer a drill sergeant. He is a motivator, screaming at you to push harder, to ignore the pain, to row for your lives. The clash of swords and the shouts of the boarding party a few moments ago felt like a distant, almost noble struggle. This chase feels like a desperate, undignified race for survival. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of the Roman Navy against pirates. Was it a constant, low-level conflict that the Romans mostly ignored, or was it a major strategic concern that required constant vigilance? Your centurion's frantic orders suggest the latter. A light joke you hear from a veteran, his face a mask of grim determination as he pulls on his oar. Is that at least the pirates will give you a chance to practice your running? The joke dies in your throat. You are running from a very real and very deadly threat. You glance at the bound prisoners below deck, and you can't help but wonder if their fate is soon to be your own. You pull on the oar, your muscles screaming, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs, and you pray to every god you can think of that the galley is fast enough, that the pirates are not. The chase is a brutal, heart-stopping affair. You and your fellow oarsmen are pushing the galley to its absolute limit, a desperate, frantic rhythm that leaves you breathless and trembling. The centurion's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated focus, his whip a constant, terrifying threat that keeps you from giving in to your exhaustion. A mainstream historical fact you're seeing in action is the brutal reality of Roman naval manpower. Galleys were often rowed by a mix of men. Some were free men, some were provincials, and a significant portion were condemned criminals or slaves. In this moment, the distinction is meaningless. You are all just bodies, just engines, and your only purpose is to make the ship go faster. The man next to you, a grizzled veteran with a face like a storm-beaten rock, sees the look of despair on your face. He grunts a single word. Ergastulum. It's a Latin word for a workhouse for slaves and prisoners, a kind of prison camp where men were chained and forced into hard labor. He points a gnarled thumb at a group of men a few benches over. These are the ergastulari, men condemned to a life of rowing. Their faces are blank, their eyes devoid of hope, their bodies a testament to a life of brutal, relentless work. You realize that a good number of the men on this ship didn't choose to be here. They were sentenced to it. This grim reality is a sharp contrast to the patriotic songs and stories of glory that you were told before you boarded. You are a part of a brutal, unyielding machine, and the fuel that makes it run is human misery. Historians still argue about the proportion of these different types of rowers on Roman ships. Was the Roman Navy primarily powered by a professional class of freemen, or was it a system built on forced labor? The sight of the ergastulari makes the answer feel painfully clear. These men are not soldiers, they are prisoners, and their only purpose is to keep the ship moving, to keep you, the freeman, from being caught by the pirates. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran is that sometimes the ergastulari were given small, almost invisible tattoos on their foreheads, a mark of their status, a permanent brand of shame. The pirates are gaining on you. Their smaller, faster ship is a ghost on the waves, and you can see the cruel, hungry glint of the sun on their weapons. The centurion's whip cracks the air, a sound like a thunderclap, and he screams, Row faster for your lives for Rome. The men, free men and slaves alike, respond with a desperate surge of energy, a final, monumental effort to outrun the predators. A light joke, whispered by the veteran next to you, is that the centurion's whip is the only thing on the ship that's getting a good workout. The joke is a grim acknowledgement of the impossible situation you are in. Your life, your freedom, and your future are now a function of your muscles, your endurance, and your ability to outrun a group of men who have nothing to lose. You pull on the oar, your body a mass of screaming agony, and you pray to every god you can think of that the galley is fast enough, that the pirates are not. The pirates, a relentless and hungry pack, eventually give up the chase. You watch their ship, a speck on the horizon, disappear back into the haze from which it came. The sudden absence of threat is almost as terrifying as its presence. The centurion, his face still a mask of grim determination, allows the pace of the rowing to slow, and the galley settles back into its familiar, weary rhythm. The immediate danger is past, but the memory of the chase, the visceral terror of being hunted, lingers in the air. This moment of peace is a fragile one, and the men know it. The captain, a man you've only ever seen as a distant figure, now makes his way down to the gutter. His presence is a rare and unsettling event, a sign that something of importance is about to happen. He is not here to thank you. He is here to lead a religious ritual. A mainstream historical fact you're about to witness is that Roman naval warfare was as much about piety as it was about strategy. The gods, particularly the sea god Neptune and the god of war Mars, were seen as crucial allies in battle. You are all expected to participate, to give thanks for your survival, and to ask for continued good fortune. A small altar is set up on the deck, and the captain, along with a few officers, begins to lead the ritual. A small fire is lit, and a handful of incense is tossed into the flames. The sweet, exotic smell of the burning incense is a stark contrast to the overpowering stench of the bilge water and unwashed bodies. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran next to you is that sometimes, if a priest was not on board, the captain himself would perform the ceremony, a sign of his immense power and authority. He tells you to say a silent prayer to your chosen god, that the gods don't care who you pray to, as long as you pray. The captain raises his hands and begins to chant a prayer, his voice a low, somber murmur. He thanks the gods for their protection, for the defeat of the enemy, and for your continued survival. He makes a small offering of wine, pouring a libation onto the deck, a symbolic offering to the sea gods. Historians still argue about the sincerity of these religious rituals. Were they genuine expressions of faith, or were they a form of social control, a way to unite a disparate crew of free men, slaves, and foreigners under a common banner of Roman piety? In this moment, as you stand there, exhausted and terrified, the sincerity of the ritual feels meaningless. All that matters is the hope, however slim, that the gods are listening. As the ceremony ends and the captain returns to his quarters, a distant, untouchable figure once again. The men, their heads bowed, return to their benches. A quiet, somber group. The smell of incense lingers in the air, a fleeting memory of a world that is not your own. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that he prayed for a better meal, not just a safer journey. The joke is a quiet, shared moment of dark humor, a way of acknowledging the grim reality of your lives. You sit on your bench, the hard wood digging into your flesh, and you look out at the endless expanse of the sea. The gods, you think, are a long way away, and the only thing that will keep you alive is your strength, your endurance, and the silent rhythm of the oars. The ritual is over. The smoke from the incense has long since dissipated, and you are back to the familiar, punishing routine of rowing. But the brief moment of quiet and prayer has given you a new perspective. You are not just a rower on a ship. You are a part of a much larger picture, a piece in the grand, brutal chess game of the Roman Empire. A mainstream historical fact you're beginning to understand is that the Roman Navy was the physical manifestation of Rome's geopolitical ambitions. It was the instrument of conquest, the defender of trade routes, and the enforcer of Roman will across the Mediterranean Sea, which the Romans, with a certain amount of hubris, called Mare Nostrum, our sea. Your galley, a sleek and deadly weapon of war, is not an isolated entity. It is a part of a fleet, a floating army designed to project Roman power far beyond the city's walls. The battles you fought and the dangers you faced weren't just random events. They were a part of a larger campaign, a series of strategic moves designed to secure Roman dominance. You are a cog in a massive machine, and the work you do, the pain you endure, is all for the glory of Rome, a city you may never see again. Historians still argue about the true purpose of the Roman Navy. Was it primarily an offensive force, designed to conquer new lands and expand the empire? Or was it a defensive one, designed to protect Rome's vast and vulnerable trade routes from pirates and rival nations? The answer is likely both. The Navy was a flexible and powerful tool, a hammer that could be used to smash an enemy or a shield to protect the empire's economic heart. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran next to you is that some ships in the fleet were not even war galleys. They were specialized cargo ships, known as corbita, used to transport grain and other goods. These were often a favorite target for pirates, and the war galley's job was to protect them. As you row, you realize that your life and the lives of every man on this ship are a testament to the immense power and reach of Rome. The clothes on your back, the food in your stomach, however meager, and the very oar in your hand are all products of a vast and complex empire. The centurion's constant demands for speed are not just about reaching a destination, they are about maintaining the speed of the empire itself, about ensuring that Rome's will is carried out with ruthless efficiency. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the emperor probably doesn't even know your name, but he's the one who gets to take credit for all your hard work. It's a bitter joke, but there's a kernel of truth in it. You are anonymous, a faceless part of a massive force. Your glory, if you ever find it, will be in the stories of the centurions and the officers, the men who stand on the upper deck and command the human engine that you are a part of. You look out at the endless expanse of the sea, a world that is now Mare Nostrum, and you pull on your oar, a silent and unwilling contributor to the grand, bloody epic of the Roman Empire. The rowing rhythm has settled back into a comfortable, if still exhausting, cadence. Your muscles, now accustomed to the work, have found their groove. You're a part of the human engine, a component in a well-oiled machine. As you pull, your mind wanders, and you find yourself listening to the veterans around you. They're a font of knowledge and a source of the ship's unofficial history, a tapestry of tales, superstitions, and hard-won wisdom. The man next to you, the one with the face like a storm-beaten rock, is the storyteller tonight. He begins to talk about a battle from years ago, a clash with a Carthaginian fleet. His voice, a low and raspy murmur, is a stark contrast to the centurion's bellow. He describes the battle not in terms of strategy or glory, but in terms of survival. He talks about the terrible groaning of the ships, the screaming of the men, and the awful final sound of a galley as it breaks apart. He recalls a quirky tidbit about the battle. A Carthaginian oar, snapped in half by a ramming attack, flew through the air and took the head off a Roman centurion. The story is a grim reminder that in war, a hero's death is a rare luxury. Most men die in a sudden, brutal, and utterly meaningless way. He also tells you about the superstitions of the sea. He talks about the fear of ghosts, the souls of drowned sailors who haunt the waves. He warns you never to whistle on the ship, as it is said to call the wind and summon a storm. He tells you a story about a captain who whistled a tune, and within an hour, a squall appeared from nowhere and nearly capsized the ship. A mainstream historical fact you're learning through his stories is that Roman sailors, like sailors of all ages, were deeply superstitious. They would make small sacrifices, wear amulets, and perform rituals to appease the gods and ward off bad luck. The veterans' stories are not for entertainment. They are a kind of living history, a way of passing on the lessons of the past. He talks about a battle where a Roman galley was surrounded and the crew fought to the last man, a tale of heroism that, for a moment, makes you feel a glimmer of pride. He also talks about a battle where a galley surrendered and the crew was taken as slaves, a tale of shame and despair that makes you shudder. Historians still argue about the reliability of these oral histories. Were they based on real events, or were they embellished over time? A mix of fact and fiction designed to build a sense of camaraderie and shared identity among the crew in this moment. Listening to the veteran, the distinction feels irrelevant. All that matters is the story, the connection to a past that you are now a part of. A light joke, he tells you, a final punchline to a grim tale, is that he's seen more battles than he's had hot meals, and that's why he looks so old. The joke is a perfect summary of life on a Roman galley, a brutal, relentless cycle of work and hardship, punctuated by moments of terror and brief, fleeting moments of quiet reflection. You listen to him, a silent, attentive audience, and you pull on your oar, your mind filled with the ghosts and stories of the sea, a past that is now becoming a part of your own future. You've spent so much time in the claustrophobic confines of the gutter that you've come to see the ship as a series of benches and oars, but the veterans' stories have opened your eyes to a new truth. The galley is more than just a rowing machine. It's a complex and intricate piece of engineering. The centurion, sensing a brief lull in the action, gives a quick, impromptu lecture on the parts of the ship, a practical lesson in survival. He points to the massive mast, now thankfully lowered and secured, a towering tree of wood that, when raised, holds a massive sail. This is the galley's power when the winds are favorable. It's a mainstream historical fact that, while galleys were primarily rowed, they used sails to conserve energy and travel long distances when the weather permitted. The centurion points to the complex network of ropes and pulleys that once held the sail aloft, a testament to the sophistication of Roman rigging. A quirky tidbit you learn is that the mast and sail were often used as a kind of emergency rudder in a storm, a way to keep the ship from being completely overwhelmed by the waves. He then points to the upper deck, the space where the officers and soldiers stand, and where the battles are fought. This is the command center and the fighting platform. Below you, in the dark, putrid depths of the ship, is the bilge, the lowest point of the hull where the water collects. The centurion makes it clear that your life depends on keeping this space as dry as possible. A brutal and never-ending job. He points to the very backbone of the ship, the keel, a massive timber that runs the length of the vessel and gives it its structural integrity. This is the spine of the galley, the part that holds it all together. Historians still argue about the exact methods and materials used by Roman shipbuilders. Were they master craftsmen with a deep understanding of naval architecture, or were they simply following a traditional, time-honored design? The brutal efficiency of the galley suggests a bit of both. The centurion then points to the stern, the rear of the ship, where the rudder is located. This is the part that steers the vessel, a massive, flat piece of wood that turns the entire ship. He explains that the rudder is a delicate and crucial part of the galley, and that a single hit in battle could render the ship useless. He also points to the bronze ram at the bow, the part of the ship that is both its most powerful weapon and its most vulnerable point. It is a massive piece of metal designed for a single, devastating purpose, and it is a testament to the brutal, unforgiving nature of Roman naval warfare. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a boat because he talks about the ship like it's his child. It's a joke that gets a few tired, weary smiles. The centurion's lecture is a grim, practical lesson in the anatomy of a warship. You are not just a passenger, you are a living, breathing part of this intricate and deadly machine, and your survival depends on a deep and visceral understanding of its strengths and weaknesses. You look at the different parts of the ship, at the wood and the bronze and the leather, And you realize that every single piece has a purpose, a role to play in the grand, brutal epic of the Roman Empire. The centurion's impromptu lecture ends, and the silence that follows is a mix of exhaustion and a newfound respect for the vessel that is both your prison and your home. The Galley, a battered veteran of the sea, has survived the storm and the pirate chase, and for a brief moment, there's a collective sigh of relief. You hear a few scattered, weary cheers from the upper deck, a sign that the men are celebrating a victory. The battle may be over, but the work is not. The centurion's voice, now a bit more relaxed, barks out an order: clean the deck. Now, the smell of success, you're learning, is a complex bouquet of old blood, salt, and sweat. The deck is a mess of splintered wood, abandoned weapons, and the grim stains of battle. The centurion, a man who values discipline above all else, insists on a thorough cleaning. You and your fellow oarsmen are handed buckets and rough sponges, and you begin the gruesome task of scrubbing the deck. A mainstream historical fact you're experiencing is that Roman military discipline was legendary, and it extended to every aspect of life, even the grim aftermath of a battle. A clean ship was a sign of a well-disciplined crew, and a well-disciplined crew was a sign of a professional fighting force. As you scrub, you notice the men around you. The tired, grim faces are now a little more relaxed, the tension gone from their shoulders. They're talking, a low, rumbling murmur of conversation that is a stark contrast to the silence of the battle. They're telling stories, sharing jokes, and, for a moment, they're not just oarsmen, they're men. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that after a successful battle, the centurion would often allow the crew to sing a song of victory, a loud, raucous tune that was a mix of a prayer and a celebration. He says it was the one time the centurion would tolerate noise that wasn't a command. The cleaning is a way of washing away the past, a way of moving on from the trauma of the battle. The deck, once a battlefield, is now just a deck again. The grim stains are gone, replaced by the clean, wet gleam of the polished wood. The centurion, his face a mask of grim satisfaction, watches you work, his hands on his hips. He's not just overseeing a cleaning, he's overseeing a ritual, a way of restoring order and discipline to a world that was, for a brief moment, a world of chaos and death. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of these kinds of rituals. Were they a way of building camaraderie and esprit de corps? Or were they just another form of brutal discipline in this moment? As you scrub the deck, it feels like both. The shared work, the low murmur of conversation, and the feeling of a job well done are all a form of communal healing. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a mop because he's a stickler for a clean deck. The joke is a quiet, shared moment of dark humor, a way of acknowledging the ridiculousness of your situation. You finish your scrubbing, and you look at the clean, wet deck, and you feel a strange sense of pride. You survived the battle, you survived the chase, and now you've cleaned the deck. You are a part of a larger story, a testament to the brutal, unyielding power of Rome, a power that you are now a living part of. With the deck finally clean and the immediate threat neutralized, the galley falls into a different kind of rhythm, the weary, slow beat of a ship on a long voyage. You are no longer on a war footing, but you are still a part of a massive, logistical puzzle. A mainstream historical fact you are now experiencing is the immense challenge of supplying a Roman fleet. It wasn't enough to have powerful ships and disciplined men. You needed to feed, water, and arm them, often thousands of miles from the heart of the empire. This required a vast and complex supply chain, a system of transport ships, ports, and warehouses that stretched across the Mediterranean. The galley, though it carries a small store of provisions, is not self-sufficient. You see the officers on the upper deck poring over maps, not of battlefields, but of ports and supply depots. Their job is not just to fight the enemy, but to find a safe harbor where they can replenish the galley's dwindling stores of food and water. You hear a veteran next to you grumble about the food, a low, constant complaint that is a part of the soundtrack of your life. He tells you that the food in the port is always better, a brief moment of culinary luxury that you can look forward to. Historians still argue about the exact nature of these supply chains. Were they highly centralized and controlled by the state, or were they a mix of private contractors and local levies? Your experience suggests a bit of both. You are a part of a military machine, but the food and water you receive are often a product of local levies, a tax on the provinces that you are protecting. A quirky tidbit you learn from the veteran is that sometimes, if a port was running low on supplies, the soldiers would be sent on a foraging mission to the surrounding countryside, a task that was often as dangerous as a battle. The centurion's voice, now a bit more relaxed, barks out an order to conserve water. He reminds you that you are still a long way from the next port and that every drop of water is a drop of life. The water ration, already meager, is now even smaller. You are constantly thirsty, a gnawing, low-level discomfort that never goes away. You are learning a brutal lesson in the economics of war. Your life is a commodity, and it is a commodity that is expensive to maintain. A light joke you hear from a veteran, his face a mask of grim determination, is that the centurion's mother must have been a camel, because he seems to be able to go for days without a drink. The joke is a perfect summary of your situation, a life of constant, grinding hardship, punctuated by moments of danger and brief, fleeting moments of quiet reflection. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and thirst, and you think of the next port, a place you've never been, a place that, for you, is no longer a destination, but a promise of fresh water. The Galley, its sail now raised to catch the lazy afternoon breeze, is a quiet, almost peaceful place. The rhythm of the rowing is slower, a gentle and unhurried cadence. You are still exhausted, your body aching with a low-level, constant pain, but the absence of a threat, the promise of a port, has given you a different kind of energy hope. This is when the stories begin again, but this time, they are not tales of your own battles. They are tales of other ships, other campaigns, a chronicle of the fleet's triumphs and tragedies. A veteran, his face a roadmap of hard living, begins to speak in a low voice. He talks about a sister ship, a galley that fought a brilliant battle against a superior fleet and emerged victorious. He describes the bravery of the captain, the discipline of the centurions, and the courage of the rowers. This is a mainstream historical fact you're learning through the oral tradition of the galley. The Roman Navy was a living, breathing entity, a collection of ships and men with their own stories, their own victories, and their own heartbreaking defeats. These stories were a way of building a sense of identity, a way of making you feel a part of something larger than yourself. But for every tale of triumph, there is a tale of tragedy. The veteran talks about a galley that was caught in a storm and never returned. He describes the terrible helplessness of watching from a distance as the ship was swallowed by the waves, a moment of pure, unadulterated terror. He talks about a galley that was ambushed by pirates, its crew taken as slaves, its ship a burned-out hulk. He talks about the shame of defeat, the pain of loss, and the ever-present danger of the sea. Historians still argue about the true casualty rates of Roman naval warfare. Were they high, a testament to the brutal nature of combat, or were they low, a testament to the efficiency and discipline of the Roman fleet? The veterans' stories suggest a mix of both, a world where heroism and tragedy exist side by side. A quirky tidbit you learn from him is that sometimes, if a galley was lost at sea, the remaining crew would perform a small ritual, a kind of funeral at sea, where they would throw a small piece of wood or a flower into the water in memory of their fallen comrades. It was a way of honoring the dead and acknowledging the dangers of the sea, a small but significant act of defiance against the terrible power of nature. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a grim grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a poet, because he's got a story for every wave. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger, and a constant flow of stories that serve as a reminder of the world you're a part of. You listen to him, a silent, attentive audience, and you pull on your oar, your mind filled with the ghosts and stories of the sea, a past that is now becoming a part of your own future. The galley, a weary veteran, finally begins to approach a port. The sight of land is a profound relief, a promise of solid ground, and a brief respite from the relentless motion of the sea. The men around you, once a silent, grim-faced group, are now talking excitedly, their voices filled with a new energy. This is a moment of communal hope, a shared dream of a break from the brutal routine. A mainstream historical fact you are seeing in action is the critical importance of ports in Roman naval strategy. They were not just places to resupply, they were hubs of commerce, centers of culture, and temporary homes for the crews of the Roman fleet. The port is a chaotic, vibrant world. The air, once filled with the smell of salt and sweat, is now a complex mixture of spices, cooking food, and the lowing of cattle. The sounds of the port are a symphony of life, the shouts of merchants, the cries of street vendors, and the clatter of 1,000 different people living their lives. You are a part of this world for a brief, glorious moment. The centurion's orders, once sharp and urgent, are now a bit more relaxed. He gives the men a few hours of shore leave, a precious, golden gift that you have earned with your sweat and blood. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that in some ports, there were special taverns known as thermopolia that catered exclusively to sailors, offering cheap wine, hot food, and the company of other men who had seen the same dangers you had. You step onto the dock, and the solid ground feels strange and unfamiliar. Your legs, accustomed to the constant, subtle motion of the ship, feel like they're still on the water. You find yourself swaying for a moment of profound disorientation. You walk through the streets, a silent and anonymous observer, and you watch the world go by. You see families laughing, children playing, and lovers walking hand in hand. It's a world that you were once a part of, a world that feels a million miles away. Historians still argue about the true nature of Roman port life. Was it a safe and orderly place, a testament to Roman organization, or was it a lawless and dangerous place, a magnet for criminals and lowlifes? Your experience suggests a bit of both. You see the order of the Roman military police, the vigils, but you also see the shadowy corners, the places where a man could get into trouble very quickly. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a port because he's a stickler for a clean dock. The joke is a quiet, shared moment of dark humor, a way of acknowledging the absurdity of your life. You spend your brief hours of freedom in a quiet corner of the port, eating a hot meal that tastes like a feast, and drinking a glass of wine that is not watered down. The food is simple, just some bread and salted fish, but it is a luxury you have earned with your labor. You are not a rower, not a soldier, not a slave. For a brief, golden moment, you are just a man, and the world is your own. You know that the shore leave won't last. The centurion will be back, his voice will be back, and the ship will be waiting. But for now, you are free, and that is a victory in itself. Your brief shore leave is a golden dream, and like all dreams, it comes to an end. The centurion's voice, now a bit sharper, is back, and you are all herded back onto the ship, a weary, reluctant parade of men who have tasted freedom and are now being forced back into their cage. The galley, once a symbol of hope, is now a ship of shadows, a brutal reminder of the life you've chosen. But the time in port wasn't just for resupply and rest. It was for a different kind of work, a shadow war that you are only now beginning to understand. A mainstream historical fact you're learning through the gossip of the veterans is that Roman galleys were not just fighting ships. They were also a crucial part of the Roman espionage network. They would transport spies to enemy ports, carry messages to distant allies, and act as floating eyes and ears for the Roman Empire. You hear a veteran next to you whisper about a man who was on the ship in the port. He was not a soldier, not a rower, but a man with a quiet, observant demeanor. A man who spoke with the officers in hushed tones. This was a spy, a speculator, a man who would gather information, assess enemy strength, and report back to Rome. His presence is a sign that the war you are fighting is not just a war of swords and spears. It is a war of information, a war of shadows and secrets. The centurion's voice, a low and menacing murmur, warns you all to be silent. He tells you that what you saw and heard in the port is not for public consumption. You are a part of the war of information now, and your silence is as important as your strength. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that in some galleys, the crew was forbidden from speaking to people in port, a draconian rule designed to prevent leaks of information. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of the Roman intelligence network. Was it a sophisticated, well-organized system, or was it a hodgepodge of spies, informants, and sailors' gossip? The presence of the speculator suggests a bit of both, a mix of official intelligence gathering and the unofficial, on-the-ground information that sailors of all ages are so good at collecting. The galley leaves the port, and the lights of the city slowly fade into the darkness. You are back on the open sea, a vast and lonely world where you are a tiny, insignificant speck. The centurion's voice is a constant, nagging presence, reminding you of your duty, of your silence, and of the immense power of Rome. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a spy, because he's a stickler for secrecy. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger, and a constant low-level paranoia that you are a part of a world you do not understand. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the city you just left, a place that, for you, is no longer a destination, but a memory of a brief, golden moment of freedom. The galley, now resupplied and ready for a new mission, is a flurry of activity. But this time, it's not a battle or a chase. It's a series of repairs and maintenance, a crucial period of recovery that every ship needs. The centurion's voice, a bit less menacing now, directs the men to new tasks. Some are mending torn sails, others are caulking cracks in the hull, and you, a strong but new recruit, are given the job of polishing the bronze ram at the bow. This is not a glorious job, but it is a necessary one. A mainstream historical fact you're learning is that maintenance was a constant, grueling part of a Roman galley's life. These ships were made of wood, and wood, when exposed to the constant salt and motion of the sea, breaks down. A ship that is not maintained is a ship that is destined for the bottom of the sea. As you polish the bronze ram, a massive, heavy piece of metal that gleams in the sun, you are struck by its beautiful, deadly efficiency. It's a brutal piece of art, a testament to the single-minded purpose of the Roman war machine. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that the bronze ram was not just for show. It was a single, massive casting of bronze, a feat of engineering that was meant to be both a weapon and a symbol of Roman power. It was often engraved with a dedication to a god, a silent prayer for victory. The work is backbreaking, but there is a strange sense of satisfaction in it. You are not just a rower, you are a caretaker of the ship, a man whose job it is to ensure that this vessel is ready for its next mission. Historians still argue about the quality of Roman naval craftsmanship. Were they master shipbuilders who created vessels that could withstand the rigors of the sea? Or were they more focused on speed and offensive power, a trade-off that made their ships more vulnerable to storms? And damage your work on the ram and the hull suggests that they were focused on both, a constant, grueling effort to keep the ships in fighting shape. Amidst the work, the centurion allows a small indulgence. He hands out small pieces of honey cake, a sweet, sticky treat that is a welcome contrast to the monotonous pulls. It is a small, but significant, reward for your hard work and discipline. The men, their faces grimed with dirt and sweat. Eat the honey cake with a kind of quiet reverence, a moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure in a life of constant hardship. This is not just a treat, it's a morale booster, a small act of kindness that makes you feel, for a brief moment, like a human being and not just a piece of meat. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a baker because he's a stickler for a sweet reward. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by small, fleeting moments of pleasure. You finish polishing the ram, its bronze gleaming in the sun, and you feel a strange sense of pride. You are not just a rower, you are a part of a powerful, efficient, and beautiful war machine, and your job is to keep it running. The Galley, its hull repaired and its bronze ram gleaming, is now back on the open sea, its course set for a new, unknown destination. The quiet, disciplined work of the last few days has given you a new perspective. You are not just a part of a single ship. You are a part of a massive fleet, a floating army that is the physical manifestation of Roman power. A mainstream historical fact you're beginning to understand is the sheer scale and strategic importance of the Roman Navy. It was not a small, ragtag group of ships. It was a well-organized, highly disciplined force that patrolled the entire Mediterranean, a force that could project Roman power with terrifying efficiency. The centurion's voice, a constant presence in your life, is now filled with a new kind of pride. He talks about the fleet, about the thousands of ships that sail under the Roman eagle, about the vast network of ports and supply depots that keep the fleet running. He talks about the naval bases at Misenum and Ravenna, massive, sprawling complexes that were the heart of the Roman Navy, places where ships were built, repaired, and crewed. These were not just ports, they were industrial cities, a testament to the immense logistical power of the Roman Empire. Historians still argue about the true size of the Roman fleet. Was it a massive, all-encompassing force that ruled the seas? Or was it a smaller, more specialized force that was used for specific campaigns? The centurion's words and the evidence of the organized logistics suggest a bit of both. The Roman Navy was a flexible tool, a force that could be scaled up for a major war or scaled down for a campaign against pirates. It was a force that was always on the move, always working, always a part of the vast and complex machine of the Roman Empire. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that the Roman Navy was so vast that it had its own internal language, a mix of Latin and Greek and other languages from the men who crewed the ships. It was a language of command, of warning, and of shared experience, a language that only the men of the fleet could understand. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been an ocean, because he's a stickler for a big fleet. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer scale of the world you're a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the vast, unseen fleet, a world of ships and men that is your home, your family, and your destiny. The Galley, a single ship in a vast and powerful fleet, is a world of constant motion and perpetual work. But you're beginning to understand that the greatest enemy isn't the pirates or a rival navy, it's the sea itself, and the constant battle against the one thing that can sink a ship without a single sword being drawn water. A mainstream historical fact you're learning the hard way is that even the most meticulously built wooden ships took on water. The constant motion of the waves, the stress of battle, and the simple fact that wood and iron were not perfectly sealed meant that water was a constant, low-level threat. You are a part of a constant, grueling rotation of bailing duty. The bilge, the lowest point of the ship, is a perpetual cesspool of murky, foul-smelling liquid. Your job, a brutal and thankless task, is to plunge a wooden bucket into that foul liquid and heave it over the side. The work is never-ending. The moment you finish one round of bailing, the water starts to creep back in, a slow, patient, and relentless enemy. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that the men who were on permanent bailing duty, the ones who spent their entire lives in the dark, wet confines of the bilge, were known as centina. Their name, a word for the bilge itself, was a badge of shame, a sign that they were the lowest of the low. The constant battle against the water is not just a physical one, it's a mental one. The water, a symbol of the sea's power, is a constant reminder of your own vulnerability. The centurion's voice, a constant presence in your life, now takes on a new, urgent tone. He reminds you that a wet ship is a slow ship, and a slow ship is a dead ship. He tells you that your life depends on your ability to keep the water at bay. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of Roman bailing technology. Was it a simple system of buckets, or were there more sophisticated pumps and siphons? Your experience suggests a simple system of buckets and manpower, a brutal and effective way to keep the ships afloat. Amidst the constant work, a light joke you hear from a veteran is that the centurion's mother must have been a fish because he's a stickler for a dry ship. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger, and a constant, low-level paranoia that you are a part of a world you do not understand. You pull on the rope, a bucket of foul bilge water in your hands, and you think of the water you need to drink, the precious, warm liquid that is so scarce. You are a man surrounded by water, and you are constantly thirsty, a brutal and ironic reality that you have learned to live with. You look at the dark, foul liquid in your bucket, and you think of the vast, very clean ocean that surrounds you, and you realize that on a Roman galley, even the most basic elements of life are a source of constant, grueling struggle. The galley, a weary and battered veteran, is now sailing through the aftermath of a battle you were a part of. The sea, a beautiful and terrifying thing, is now a graveyard. The centurion's voice, a grim and serious murmur, warns you all to keep your eyes open. This is not a time for celebration. It's a time for a grim and somber duty. A mainstream historical fact you're learning is that a successful naval battle was only half the story. The other half was the grim, brutal task of cleaning up the wreckage and, if necessary, salvaging anything of value. This was not a job for the faint of heart. As the galley sails through the debris of the battle, you see the true cost of war. The water is littered with the splintered remains of ships, a terrible mess of wood and rope. You see the bodies of men, both friend and foe, floating in the water, their faces a grim and silent testament to the brutality of war. The centurion's voice, a low and serious murmur, warns you all to not look away. He tells you that this is a part of war, a grim reality that you must learn to live with. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that the men who were tasked with retrieving the bodies were often given a small ration of extra wine, a way of helping them deal with the terrible reality of their job. The galley slows to a crawl, and the men on the upper deck begin the gruesome task of salvaging. They pull what they can from the water weapons, shields, and anything else of value. The rest, the debris and the bodies, are left to the sea and the carrion birds that circle overhead. Historians still argue about the etiquette of these post-battle cleanups. Was there a code of honor, a system of mutual respect between the warring parties, or was it a brutal and lawless free-for-all? The grim reality you're seeing suggests the latter, a world where the only thing that matters is survival and the spoils of war. Amidst the chaos and the horror, a light joke you hear from a veteran is that the centurion's mother must have been a vulture, because he's a stickler for a good scavenging run. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger, and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you are a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the men you just fought, the men whose bodies you are now sailing past. You realize that you are just a few inches of wood and a few strokes of an oar away from the same fate, a grim and terrifying thought that will stay with you for the rest of your life. The grim work of salvaging is over, and the galley, its deck now a little more crowded with salvaged goods, is once again on the open sea. The atmosphere is tense, a heavy silence hanging over the crew. You are all a part of a grim and brutal world, and the men who command you are a part of that world, too. A mainstream historical fact you're about to experience is a rare glimpse into that world. A brief, fleeting look at the life of the ship's commander. The centurion's voice, a low and serious murmur, gives a simple order. One man from each bench for a new detail. Your name is called. You and a small group of other oarsmen are led up a set of stairs to the upper deck, a world you've only seen from a distance. The air here is cleaner, the light brighter, and the space a luxury you can barely comprehend. You are led to the stern of the ship, to a small, private cabin, the commander's quarters. The contrast between this world and your own is staggering. The cabin is not large, but it is a palace compared to the gutter. It is filled with a small desk, a comfortable-looking chair, and a bunk with a real mattress and soft-looking blankets. There is a small oil lamp, a map, and a few scrolls, a stark reminder that this man is a strategist, a thinker, a man of power. A quirky tidbit you notice is a small, intricate mosaic on the floor, a tiny picture of a dolphin. It's a beautiful, delicate piece of art that seems completely out of place in this world of brutality and death. The commander himself is a man of quiet authority. He is not a bellowing centurion, but a man of calm, measured tones. He is not a warrior, but a man of intellect. He asks you and the others to help him with a simple task to move a heavy chest from his cabin to a more secure location. The chest, when you lift it, is heavy with the weight of gold or silver, a symbol of the wealth and power that this man represents. Historians still argue about the true nature of the relationship between a Roman commander and his crew. Was it a relationship of mutual respect, or was it a purely transactional one? A master and his slaves. Your brief glimpse into his world suggests a mix of both. He is a man of immense power and authority, but he is also a man who is a part of the same brutal, dangerous world you are. As you finish the task and are sent back to the gutter, you can't help but think of the life that this man lives. He is not a rower, not a fighter, but a man who thinks, who plans, who commands. He is a world away from you, and yet, in the end, his fate is tied to your own. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the commander's mother must have been a senator, because he's a stickler for a comfortable bed. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger and a constant, low-level envy of the world that you are a part of, but can never truly be a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the dolphin on the floor, a beautiful, delicate symbol of a world that is not your own. The galley, a weary and battered veteran, is now a ship of rhythm. The commander's quarter, with its luxurious trappings, is a fleeting memory. The true reality of your life is here, in the gutter, a world of wood, sweat, and muscle. You have become one with the rhythm of the ship, a part of a human engine that works in perfect, brutal synchronization. The centurion's voice, a low and constant murmur, is your metronome. His commands a series of simple, repetitive words: pull, hold, and out. Your body, once a source of pain and protest, is now a tool. Your muscles, once soft and unused, are now hard and corded. Your hands, once smooth, are now a mass of calluses and scars. You are no longer just a man. You are an extension of the oar, a living, breathing part of the galley. A mainstream historical fact you are now a part of is the profound psychological and physical transformation that a rower underwent. The constant, repetitive motion of the rowing was a kind of meditation, a way of emptying your mind of all thought and emotion, of becoming a part of the machine. The rhythm of the rowing is a hypnotic thing. It's a low, constant hum that fills your world, a sound that is a mix of the creaking of the wood, the splashing of the water, and the groans of the men. It's a rhythm that you have learned to live with, a rhythm that you have learned to love in a strange, masochistic way. It's a rhythm that tells you that you are alive, that you are a part of a powerful and ancient force, a force that you are now a part of. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that some men would sing a low, rumbling sea shanty, a song that was meant to be a kind of spiritual metronome, a way of keeping time and keeping their spirits up. The constant rhythmic motion of the rowing is a kind of escape. It's a way of forgetting the hunger, the thirst, the fear, and the brutality of your life. It's a way of just existing, of just being. Historians still argue about the psychological toll of this kind of work. Was it a form of mind-numbing slavery, or was it a form of communal bonding, a way of building a sense of shared identity and purpose? Your experience suggests a bit of both. You are a slave to the rhythm, but you are also a part of a community, a group of men who are all sharing the same pain, the same struggle, and the same destiny. A light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a drum because he's a stickler for a good beat. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you are a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a massive exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the rhythm, the constant, hypnotic rhythm that is now a part of you, a part of your life, and a part of your destiny. The long, hypnotic rhythm of the rowing has been your entire world. You've become a part of the ship, a silent, anonymous cog in a massive machine. But the centurion's voice, a constant presence in your life, now takes on a new, urgent tone. Land sighted, he bellows, his voice filled with a new kind of energy. The rhythm of the rowing changes, becoming faster, more urgent, more focused. This is not a port, it's a coastline, a rugged, wild land with no signs of civilization. A mainstream historical fact you're about to experience is the other half of a Roman galley's mission coastal assaults. These ships weren't just for fighting other ships. They were also a crucial part of an invasion force, a way of bringing Roman power directly to the enemy's shores. The galley, a massive, powerful machine, slows to a crawl as it approaches the shore. The men on the upper deck, once a distant and untouchable group, are now a flurry of activity, their swords and shields gleaming in the sun. The centurion's voice is a constant, low murmur, giving orders, reminding the men of their duty, of their training, of their glorious destiny. This is a moment of pure, unadulterated terror. The battle you fought on the sea was a chaotic, brutal affair. But this is a different kind of terror, a slow, methodical, and chillingly precise kind of violence. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that the men who were on the first wave of a coastal assault were often given a small, almost invisible tattoo on their forearm, a symbol of their bravery and their willingness to face certain death. The men begin to descend from the ship, a line of silent, grim-faced warriors. They are not rowers, they are soldiers, and their job is to secure the beach, to hold the line, to make a path for the rest of the fleet. The centurion's voice, a low and menacing whisper, reminds you of your duty. You are not a soldier. Your job is to stay on the ship, to be ready to row, to be ready to fight. You are a part of the second wave, the men who will follow the first, the men who will secure the beachhead and begin the long, bloody march inland. Historians still argue about the true nature of these coastal assaults. Were they a brilliant, well-organized strategy, or were they a brutal, last-ditch effort to break an enemy's will? The grim, silent faces of the men descending from the ship suggest a bit of both, a mix of brilliant strategy and brutal, unforgiving reality. Amidst the chaos and the terror, a light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a beach, because he's a stickler for a clean landing. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger, and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you are a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the men who are now fighting on the beach, the men who are giving their lives for a city you have never seen. You realize that you are just a few inches of wood and a few strokes of an oar away from the same fate, a grim and terrifying thought that will stay with you for the rest of your life. The coastal assault is underway, and the rhythmic sound of the oars is replaced by the far-off clang of steel and the shouts of men. You are no longer just an oarsman. You are a listener, a silent observer of a world of violence. The ship, once a world of its own, is now a listening post, a place where you can hear the sounds of a battle without being a part of it. A mainstream historical fact you're learning is that a Roman galley was a noisy, bustling, and often terrifying place. It was a world of sound, and the sounds were a part of the rhythm of your life. Your world, for the past few weeks, has been a symphony of sound. The low, constant murmur of the waves, the creaking of the wood, the slap of the water against the hull, the shouts of the centurion, and the rhythmic groan of the oars. You've learned to distinguish between these sounds, to know what they mean, to know what they portend. You know the difference between the sound of a calm sea and a storm. You know the difference between the sound of a fast rowing pace and a slow one. You know the difference between the sound of a battle and the quiet that follows. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that some men could tell the speed of the ship just by the sound of the water passing under the hull, a kind of auditory navigation that was a part of the informal knowledge of the galley. The sounds of the battle are a new, terrifying part of your world. The clash of steel, the shouts of men, the screams of the wounded. These are the sounds of a world that is not your own, but a world that you are a part of. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of Roman signaling in a naval battle. Did they use flags, horns, or drums to communicate? The sounds you hear suggest a mix of all three, a chaotic and brutal system of communication that was meant to be heard over the roar of the battle. Amidst the chaos and the terror, a light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a horn, because he's a stickler for a loud signal. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you are a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the men who are now fighting on the beach, the men who are giving their lives for a city you have never seen. You realize that you are just a few inches of wood and a few strokes of an oar away from the same fate, a grim and terrifying thought that will stay with you for the rest of your life. The sounds of the battle on the shore, a grim and distant symphony of violence, slowly begin to fade. The centurion's voice, a constant presence in your life, is a bit more relaxed, a sign that the worst is over, but a new, more terrifying sound emerges from the horizon, the sound of another ship, not a small, fast ship like the pirates, but a massive, hulking warship, a true naval Goliath. A mainstream historical fact you're learning is that Roman fleets, for all their power and organization, were not always the most powerful vessels on the sea. The Hellenistic successor kingdoms, particularly the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, built massive multi-level galleys known as monster ships that dwarfed the Roman vessels. The sight of this ship is a profound and terrifying lesson in humility. Your galley, a sleek and deadly weapon of war, looks like a toy next to this monster. It's a massive, multi-level ship, its deck a towering fortress of wood and bronze. The oars, massive and numerous, are a constant, low rumble, a sound of power and immense, unstoppable force. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that some of these monster ships were so big that they had their own ballistae and catapults, a kind of floating artillery that could destroy a Roman galley from a distance. The centurion's voice, a low and serious murmur, gives a simple order: do not engage, retreat. This is a new and terrifying command. You have been trained to fight, to conquer, to ram, and to board. You have been told that you are a part of the most powerful navy in the world, but now you are being told to run. This is a profound and terrifying lesson in the realities of power. You are not always the biggest, not always the strongest. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of these monster ships. Were they a brilliant, devastating weapon of war, or were they a clumsy, unwieldy liability? Your centurion's order to retreat suggests a bit of both. They were a powerful deterrent, but they were also a nightmare to maneuver and a logistical challenge to crew and supply. Amidst the chaos and the terror, a light joke you hear from a veteran is that the centurion's mother must have been a mouse because he's a stickler for a good retreat. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you are a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the monster ship, a massive, terrifying symbol of a world that is not your own, a world that you are a part of, but can never truly be a part of. The monster ship, a hulking and terrifying presence, eventually disappears into the haze of the horizon. The centurion's voice, a bit more relaxed, gives the order to resume a normal rowing rhythm. The fear, a cold, hard knot in your stomach, begins to dissipate, replaced by a profound and weary exhaustion. You are a part of a brutal world, a world where you are not always the conqueror, but sometimes the conquered. But even in this world of hardship and danger, there are small, cherished moments of relief. A mainstream historical fact you're learning is that Roman sailors, like men of all ages, found small ways to cope with the brutal reality of their lives. These were not luxuries, but small, fleeting moments of pleasure that made the pain a little more bearable. The centurion, a man who seems to have a new appreciation for a quiet, uneventful journey, allows the pace of the rowing to slow, and he gives the men a small ration of sour wine, diluted with water. It's not a feast, but it's a small, fleeting moment of pleasure. You drink the wine, the thin, vinegary liquid burning your throat, and you feel a moment of profound gratitude. It's a small victory in a world of constant hardship, a small sign that you are still a human being, and not just a piece of meat. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that some men would save their wine ration for a special occasion, a kind of ritual of hope, a small, tangible reminder that there was something to look forward to. The men begin to talk, a low, rumbling murmur of conversation that is a stark contrast to the silence of the last few days. They are not talking about battles or enemies, but about home, about their families, about the things they miss. They are a group of men who are all sharing the same pain, the same struggle, and the same destiny. And in this moment of quiet conversation, they are a family. Historians still argue about the mental health of Roman sailors. Was it a world of constant, low-level trauma? Or did the men find ways to cope, to build a sense of community and shared purpose? Your experience suggests a bit of both. You are a part of a brutal world, but you have found a way to survive, a way to build a small, fragile world of your own. Amidst the chaos and the terror, a light joke you hear from a veteran is that the centurion's mother must have been a vineyard, because he's a stickler for a good drink. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you are a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a mass of exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the small, cherished moments of relief, the small victories, the small signs that you are still a human being. These are the things that will keep you alive, the things that will keep you going, the things that will keep you fighting for a world that is not your own, but a world that you are a part of. The Galley, a weary and battered veteran, is now on the last leg of its long journey. The rhythm of the rowing, once a brutal and punishing thing, is now a familiar and almost comforting beat. Your body, once a source of pain and protest, is now a tool, a machine that works in perfect, brutal synchronization. The centurion's voice, a low and constant murmur, is a part of the rhythm, a part of the soundscape of your life. He is no longer a bellowing drill sergeant, but a leader, a man who is guiding you home. A mainstream historical fact you're experiencing is the immense sense of relief and hope that a sailor would feel on the journey back to port. The war is not over, but the immediate danger is past, and the promise of home, however temporary, is a powerful motivator. The men around you, once a silent, grim-faced group, are now talking. A low, rumbling murmur of conversation that is a stark contrast to the silence of the last few weeks. They are not talking about battles or enemies, but about home, about their families, about the things they will do when they get back to Rome. They are a group of men who are all sharing the same hope, the same dream of a brief, golden moment of freedom. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that some men would carry a small, polished stone from their hometown, a kind of touchstone, a tangible reminder of the world they were fighting for. The journey back to Rome is not an easy one. The sea is still a dangerous, unpredictable world, and the galley is still a fragile, wooden toy in the hands of a powerful and unforgiving master. But the men are different. The exhaustion is still there. The pain is still there. But it is tempered by a new kind of energy, a new kind of hope. They are a part of a community, a group of men who have shared a terrible and brutal experience. And in that shared experience, they have found a kind of family. Historians still argue about the long-term effects of serving on a Roman galley. Did it make men hard and brutal, or did it forge a sense of camaraderie and brotherhood that would last a lifetime? Your experience suggests a bit of both. You are a man who has seen and done terrible things, but you have also found a kind of family, a group of men who have shared a terrible and beautiful journey with you. Amidst the chaos and the terror, a light joke you hear from a veteran is that the centurion's mother must have been a compass, because he's a stickler for a straight path home. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger, and a constant low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you are a part of. You pull on your oar, your body a massive exhaustion and weariness, and you think of the city you are heading to, a place you have never seen, a place that, for you, is no longer a destination but a promise of a brief, golden moment of freedom. You are a man on a mission, and the mission is almost over. The journey is almost over. The smell of salt and sweat is now mixed with the familiar, earthy scent of land. The skyline of Ostia, a low smudge of red tile and white marble, slowly begins to materialize on the horizon. The centurion's voice, now a bit more relaxed, is filled with a new kind of pride. He tells you that you have arrived, that you have survived, that you are a part of the grand, brutal story of Rome. A mainstream historical fact you're experiencing is the immense sense of relief and triumph that a Roman sailor would feel on arriving home. This wasn't just a port, it was a symbol of the empire itself, a place where the fruits of your labor, the spoils of your war, would be offloaded. The galley, a weary and battered veteran, glides into the harbor. The sounds of the port, once a chaotic symphony of life, are now a sweet and welcome sound. You hear the shouts of merchants, the cries of street vendors, and the clamor of the Roman world, a world that you are a part of, but can never truly be a part of. A quirky tidbit you learn from a veteran is that in some ports, the victorious galleys would be greeted with a triumphal procession, a parade of men and ships, a celebration of a job well done. Historians still argue about the frequency and scale of these triumphal processions. Were they a common occurrence, a way of celebrating every victory? Or were they a rare and special event, a way of celebrating a major victory? The quiet and orderly way your galley is greeted suggests a mix of both. the galley docks, and you step off onto solid ground. Your legs, accustomed to the constant, subtle motion of the ship, feeling strange and unfamiliar. You find yourself swaying for a moment of profound disorientation. You are a man who has lived on a ship, a man who has fought on a ship, a man who has survived on a ship. Now, you are a man who is back on land, and you are not sure what to do with yourself. The centurion gives you a final, simple order. Dismissed. You are free. You are a man who has survived a day, a week, a month on a Roman galley ship, a man who has endured the unendurable, a man who has seen and done terrible things. Amidst the chaos and the terror, a light joke you hear from a veteran, a man with a wry grin on his face, is that the centurion's mother must have been a port because he's a stickler for a good landing. The joke is a perfect summary of your life, a relentless series of hardships, punctuated by moments of danger, and a constant, low-level awe at the sheer brutality of the world you're a part of. You look back at the galley, a beautiful, deadly, and brutal piece of Roman engineering, and you think of the men who are still on board, the men who are still a part of the human engine, the men who are still a part of the rhythm. You are a man who has survived a day on a Roman galley ship, and you are a man who has a choice. You can go back to your old life, or you can go back to the sea, a world that is no longer a brutal, unforgiving master, but a part of who you are. Sweet dreams.